I have been of the opinion that when Trump talks about annexing Canada, making it the 51st state, that it's, and this is my perspective that I'll lean into before the second thing that everyone more agrees with, I think it's a part of his bravado that he enjoys being able, from the president's lectern and from his desk, to be able to say, hey, look, we're better than Canada, haha, we're better than you, you're the 51st state, we're America, haha, nah, boo boo. I think it's fun, and like, I can get that idea if it's fun, right? Who wouldn't want to be like, what do you mean Russia? You mean Alaska too? Like, if you could really just do that without caring, from the lectern to the president. Okay, I think there's a certain amount of that. I think there's a certain amount of he's trying to establish himself with a bang on the world stage. But there's also, I think, been a majority of it, or this has been the viewpoint, that it's a negotiating tactic. That Trump comes out with a wild, crazy demand. We're going to annex Canada. We're going to annex the Panama Canal. We're going to annex Greenland. We're going to annex Gaza. We're going to annex your grandmother's backyard. We're going to annex your aunt's house. We're going to annex your attic. We're going to annex your dog. We're going to annex your goldfish. We're going to annex everything. They're going to annex just the whole world, okay? Everything in the cat's pajamas. And when he's saying all this and you're listening to it, it's like, he's not only going to do this, he's going to do this all relatively within the same time frame, within 4 years. You know, it must be a negotiating tactic. It must be him, like, cocking the gun, pointing it at a bunch of people, and he's saying, I'll do it, before he then goes up to them and say, hey, I want this on trade talks. Goes to the Canadians, gets even better trade deal than that terrible one that was negotiated before. You heard him talking about a terrible trade deal. That's what he called it. A terrible trade deal. Who negotiated this trade deal, he asked. Donald Trump in 2019, but he wants an even better one still. And so since he wants a better one, you know, you open with the gun cocked and loaded, show you're crazy. And so then when you offer, hey, just give us this better trade deal, all of a sudden you conceding to Trump feels like you, like, lifting a weight off your shoulders. You can wipe the sweat off your brow because Canada's still here. And I think that this view by most analysts has also affected how some of these countries have reacted. For example, I think the Mexicans standing strong, even though there hasn't been, there hasn't been much talk about, like, specifically invading Mexico, even though there has been talk about labeling the cartel as a terrorist organization, which could then allow the president of the United States to use the authorization for use of military force, which they've used broadly in the Middle East to do things from invading countries to bombing Soleimani, to then allow them to move military assets into Mexico, which could then constitute what people would say in layman's term is an invasion, or at least a special military operation. But that's totally separate from the issue of tariffs. But she generally stood her ground. She said, yeah, sure, I'll do like 15,000, I'll do 10,000 soldiers on the border. They did the same thing under Biden. In fact, Biden got the same thing. In fact, I think he even got 15,000 at the end, and he didn't have to, like, threaten Mexico with crazy tariffs. He just negotiated it, and they did that both at the start of the Biden presidency as probably an act of good faith to open up on good terms, and it's probably what they're doing again with Trump. But then don't treat it as a major concession like Trump got this, like, raging victory. And I think that would lead me to believe that, like, oh, okay, so they're of the same belief that this is a negotiating tactic, so they're trying to hold ground. So that's been my view. I think that's the view of a lot of these foreign capitals. I think that's been the view of most analysts, and I think that's been my view up to this point. But now there's been a piece of audio that's been released that could throw that entire analysis completely on its ass. And it's 11 seconds from Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, who is soon to not be the Prime Minister of Canada, but at least is still, at least currently speaking, Prime Minister of Canada. And this is him essentially saying on a hot mic while he didn't know he was being recorded. Probably didn't know he was being recorded. We don't know for sure. But allegedly didn't know he was being recorded. Said that Trump actually wants to annex Canada. That he believes the easiest way to accomplish one of his goals would be to annex Canada into the United States, where it would become the 51st state in the Union. Let's listen.
Mr. Trump has it in mind that one of the easiest ways of doing that is absorbing our country. And it is a real thing.
Mr. Trump has it in his mind that the easiest way to do it is absorbing our country. And it is a real thing. And I can see the CNN title here at the bottom. Trudeau, Trump's idea to make Canada a 51st state. And I quote, a real plan. A real plan. A real plan. A real plan. Now, I have a few questions. Easiest way to do what? Accomplish exactly what agenda item? There's a few questions I have. And then I have some big questions. Because now we have to entertain the idea that, what if Trump's serious? But the first question I have is, to accomplish what? Easiest way to accomplish what? Energy independence? Access to the Arctic? You know, a bigger population to confront our geopolitical rivals? More access to raw minerals? Easier access to raw minerals? Better integrating the economies? Easiest to accomplish what? Is a big question I have, because I mean, he talked a lot in his opening speech, and man, the more I think about this, I mean, I don't want to panic, right? But I mean, he opened a lot on his opening speech of his presidency about manifest destiny in this supposedly golden age that was about to be unleashed upon the United States. So he's talking a lot about manifest destiny, and he's talking about annexing stuff left and right. And he's not saying for sure we will annex this. The closest he's got to that is Panama. He's saying that we will take the Panama Canal. He has said something along those lines. But if he's talking about manifest destiny as a positive and saying that we're entering a new period of it, while talking about a golden age of the United States and a new age of expansion, and we see him talking about annexing the Gaza Strip, and you have Scott Jennings on CNN, okay, the Clinton News Network, defending it, defending a Gaza annexation plan. Of course, he's like patting his answer, like we gotta wait a little bit to hear something. But before he even hears anything else, before Marco Rubio is even coming to sweep for Donald Trump, he's on CNN defending it. And it's not just him, it's a few others. What was his defense? Oh, at least Trump's talking about Gaza aspirationally. And now we hear this from Trudeau. I mean, I still lean towards, I think that it's all, I mean, I think it's a negotiating tactic still, but I think there might be, listening to stuff like this, it does very concern me, a part of Trump's mind that's like, well, if I can't do anything, right? If I can't get a big concession out of you through this, well, then maybe I will use force. Maybe I will do this. Maybe I can. I mean, like, Trump was crazy enough to try to overturn the election results after losing an election, blatantly saying that he actually won it. Just to say, doing something that you would think would be political suicide before he do it. Just denying that he lost. All the way through the court system, losing decision after decision after decision, but it didn't stop him. It didn't stop him. And for 3 hours, he watched as they besieged the Capitol building. Did nothing. He did that. That's crazy. You wouldn't think a U.S. president would do that before. When you hear a lot of the stuff that he's ordered staff to do or to try to pursue while he's in the White House, it's a lot of crazy stuff. And he's already doing stuff right now that's 100% unconstitutional. That's pretty crazy. And so while again, we shouldn't panic, we do need to treat this semi-seriously to at least understand the scenario more, especially if we're getting any audio like this. So for a moment, when let's say we connect those themes of manifest destiny, this talk of a golden age, this annexation fever, we combine it with a headstrong incoming Canadian conservative government, a popular government in Mexico that is not going to want to concede to demands, and a Danish government who thinks that it's a membership in NATO would, save it, and then Trump actually wants to do something. Let's say he actually wanted to move into Canada. Let's start with Canada instead of Panama, since this is what we're talking about here. What would happen if Trump looked at his generals and said, prepare plans to invade Canada? It's 1830, 1840 again, in the entirety of our defense planning. is centered around what if the British come back. Instead, now it's we're conquering Canada for real this time. 1812 was just a smudge on the record. Let's finish it up. What would happen? Well, at the end of the day, if the President of the United States wants plans to invade Canada, it's not like they can say, no, we completely refuse. They can try, but it wouldn't be that impossible, I think, for him to at least get plans together, to get some sort of like, what would this require? What would this take? What would the operation look like? Draw up some invasion plans, give me some scenarios, give me some options. You start talking about options. I could see him starting to do that. And I could also see Trump, as he's starting to do that, starting to ramp up his public rhetoric as he tries to get some big concession, so maybe he feels like he doesn't have to do this, i.e. saying, you know, we're making preparations. The United States is a very militarily powerful force, and Canada should not forget. Something like that, you know? And except, of course, it would be very Trumpian and like very huge bombs, you know, something along those lines. But at the end of the day, whether or not he wanted to use the authorization for use of military force, which has allowed the president to go after or go into countries that we're not at war with, for example, to do strikes in Syria, to do strikes in Iraq, to target Soleimani, even though, you know, we were not at war with Iran. He's used this very flexibly. And I would even argue in many instances unconstitutionally, because it goes way past the original purview of what that original authorization for use of military force to fight terrorism was for. And I think, for example, killing Soleimani was an overstretch of that. But to use it to invade Canada, I don't see how any judge could accept that on his face unless it was literally a Trump cultist whose only legal principle is, does this make Trump happy? And I mean, we saw how the birthright citizenship was shot down by the courts. We saw that. We saw how the other instances of Elon Musk's illegal behavior is now getting challenged by federal employees. We're seeing how other instances are getting challenged by the courts. And so the one area where we're seeing the most consistent resistance against the Trump administration is within the courts. And so if he tried to use some means around Congress, because Congress, I mean, even with the slim majority, you're going to need a 2/3 majority to go to war. He's not going to get a 2/3 majority. And if they got rid of the filibuster, which Thune in the Senate has already said he wouldn't, I do not think they're going to be able to carry every single congressperson in the Republican Party over for an invasion of Canada, where by the end of Trump's term, they're going to have to return to their constituents and answer to them why their sons died in Ottawa. And whether it was from fealty to a man or through the actual self-interest of the United States of America, its people, and their sons that will die in the dirt. And I just don't see that. I mean, look, if Trump had... Look, this thing that scares me more would be if Trump actually spent these 4 years like slowly building more popularity by just starting with the stuff that he knows is popular and holding off on a lot of his stuff later. And then in 2 years, building upon its congressional majorities so that you can't have those slim instances where one or a few drop. And then building up and up and up until he could try these types of moves in, say, 2 years or going on 4 years if he did his crazy third term nonsense, or with whoever follows him. His Dmitry Medvedev, we could call it, huh? Either, like, that would be the scenario that would scare me more in this. I just don't see an immediate ask of Congress to invade Canada as working. So he has to find another way. And I don't see the courts giving him the authorization to invade Canada without, getting a separate authorization, because the AUMF is not going to cut it unless he can try to argue to them that there are some, big terror groups in Canada that we need to move in to take out. And I could see that, considering how much he's transformed the Supreme Court with 3 additional justices for Mexico in reference to the cartels, saying, oh, look at these horrific actions of the cartels. They're terrorists. We should be able to go in and use the AMF to do that. And again, I think that's a stretch of constitutionality. I think it's unconstitutional, but I wouldn't put it past this Supreme Court. There's no, what group would you point at for Canada? So he's going to either need Congress or find some other way outside of the AUMF that I have not yet foreseen, which I just don't see as very plausible. So if Trump is serious, as Justin Trudeau is saying, and it's not just going, and he could still end up just being in a negotiating tactic because he doesn't find a way forward. But that's my main purpose here. That's my main point to get across, is I just don't see a pathway for Trump to seriously invade Canada. And I know that's why we have to sit down and talk about it because of what the Prime Minister of Canada said. But I don't see the congressional majority. I don't see the House or Senate going for it. I don't see the AUMF being justified by any court. I don't see any, I just don't see it. I at least don't see it in the next 2 years. And maybe if something crazy happens in 2 years, and something even crazier in 4, but he just doesn't have the majorities, and he doesn't have the legal authority. And so, as of right now, when considering if Trump was serious, he needs to get over those legal hurdles. And for at least the meantime, I think they're still there, which is good. Scary that we're talking about this. Hey, Danabo, you're gonna love having to edit this all on YouTube and like go on YouTube and like take this out and like make this a YouTube video. Take the first half from Twitch and like combine that with. Is that gonna be fun, Danabo? God, that's great. That's just fantastic.